Tonight, Texas Republican Congressman Michael McCaul and New York Democratic Congressman Gregory Meeks, the chair and vice chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Just coming out of this G7 meeting, Congressman Meeks, first to you, your thoughts about, there was a lot of focus on China, the expansion of China, what they're doing, and also obviously Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, now I thought it was a very good and important meeting. At separate times, Mike and I visited the region, and I think that when you look at those in the Indo-Pacific and in the region and they're concerned about the cohesive nature of China holding their economic values against them and want to make sure that we're working together. So working together with our G7 allies to make sure that we're reassuring our Indo-Pacific allies that we're working together to make sure that they will not have to worry about us moving anywhere else, but standing with them to prevent China from using its prohibitive type of coercive power against them was tremendously important.
There was one thing the president said, Congressman McCaul, that raised some eyebrows, and it was trying to interpret what he said and meant. Here it is about a thaw.
We should have an open hotline. At the Bali conference, that's what the President Xi and I agreed we were going to do and meet on. And then this silly balloon that was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spine equipment was flying over the United States, and it got shot down, and everything changed in terms of talking to one another. I think you're going to see that begin to thaw very shortly.
Obviously, the silly balloon was the spy balloon, and he said, I think you're going to see things thaw very shortly. Just your reaction to that.
Well, it wasn't a silly balloon, it was a spy balloon. It went over 3 of our nuclear sites in the United States. But having said that, I don't think our relationship is thawing. However, I do agree there should be a hotline. I remember, John Kennedy had a hotline with Khrushchev that avoided the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think it's important that world leaders have that kind of communication and not discommunication. I think Chairman Xi had shut down all communications, even with the Secretary of State. And I think that's an important thing to have. I think the G7 was successful in the sense of dealing with economic coercion. Chairman Xi said, I want all countries dependent on my supply chain so that when appropriate, I can cut them off. Very important. And I think with Ukraine, we had great progress with the F-16s. And I was very glad to see that approved. Now we just have to train the pilots.
So speaking of that, Brigadier General Pat Ryder on the F-16, and that is a change of U.S. policy.
The security assistance that we're providing them is for them to use inside Ukraine as part of their efforts to defend their country and their sovereignty. F-16s for Ukraine is about the long-term commitment to Ukraine. These F-16s will not be relevant to the upcoming counteroffensive.
Congressman Meeks, that is a shift and where this administration has been. And for the people who look at this and say it worries them, that it is kind of crawling towards a bigger U.S. presence or somehow a U.S. involvement in Ukraine, what do you say to them? You guys are on the same page.
No, I think that what we've always said is that we were going to give the Ukrainians what they need to defend their sovereignty. And that's exactly what the general was talking about, and why I think it was important to have that agreement at the G7 with all of our NATO and all of our allies in the other G7 countries, saying that we're going to train them together. We'll supply the F-16s together. We'll work together so that, because the message here is we cannot allow someone to invade a sovereign nation.
You all work on a number of different things together. You travel together, right? I mean, for people who say there's this huge split, you're working side by side on a number of different things. You have differences, right?
And what we agree to disagree when we disagree, but we do it civilly. We don't have to do it with vitriolic rhetoric, toxic rhetoric. We probably agree on 80% of foreign policy, 20% maybe not. But when we don't agree, we do it in a very civil tone. I think that's important. Our committee has always been like that, Foreign Affairs Committee. Partisanship stops at the water's edge. You
agree with that?
Yeah, no, I can agree 100%. And you know what? And I think that the fact that we do talk, Chairman McCaul gives me all the respect in the world, just as I gave him. That's mutual. And, this thing that some of the public thinks about, that because you're in a different party, that you've got horns or something is wrong with you, or, you don't ever agree on anything, should not be. We could not get what makes the United States I believe, the greatest government and the greatest country in the history of this earth is how we have our democracy. Democracy means that you don't agree all the time.
I mean, that's literally how we started this thing, and it has just kept on rolling, and more of the pairs of Democrats, Republicans coming back here to talk about how they're working together. Let me end on this, and maybe there is a little split here on this debt ceiling increase. The negotiations are still going on. A lot of people say usually the fiscal cliff, we get to it and you guys figure it out. But the logistics are starting to get a little tough here as far as actually physically getting it done.
Yeah, I would agree. I was with the speaker at lunchtime. I think we've made a lot of progress since the weekend. One thing most of us agree in a bipartisan way is that to default on our full faith and credit is not a really smart idea. It's going to send our financial markets into a tailspin. And while you can say that bravado type of rhetoric, it's not going to be good for our economy or world markets. And so, we want to work together. I think at the staff level, and I know Speaker McCarthy had a one-on-one with the president. I think, you lock them up in the room till June 1st, get something done.
All right, Congressman Meeks, how do you see it? I mean, logistically, can you just get it done? Even if you agree today, can you make the deadline?
Well, I truly hope so, because just as Mike said, we've got to get it done. The full faith and credit of the United States is on the line. I don't think there's any disagreement with that. Defaulting on our debt should not and cannot happen. So we must get it done, and we must tell our colleagues, who may want specific things, that we've got to compromise. Everybody may not get everything that they want, but what we do know, we cannot allow the full faith and credit of the United States to fail.
Well, we appreciate you coming on Common Ground, and we'll follow it all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having us.